Hey, Nebraska fans. Nebraska has had a historic season, and that has continued into March. The best way to enjoy the Huskers' postseason run stress-free is by contacting tax and business consultants. So while you're cheering for the Huskers to make some noise in the tournament, they've got your businesses back. With locations in Blair, Columbus, and Lyons, they've got you covered with expert tax planning, bookkeeping, and payroll services. Whether you're a small business owner or managing your personal taxes, let them take care of the numbers so you can focus on what really counts, like Nebraska's title chase. Visit www.taxandbusinessconsultants.com today and score a win for your financial future.
Here's Bryce Sanford, pulls up the three. Got it! 4-point play chance. Bryce Sanford.
It's Lawyer, no, tipped around, Mace has
it. Three by Jacobson, got it again. The game of the career for Cale Jacobson.
Strager steps into a three. Picks it out. Lawrence for the win. Got it!
Welcome into the Scarlet Shoot-Around Podcast. Here are your hosts, Blake and Mike.
Nebraska returns to the NCAA Tournament as a 4 seed, looking for their first ever tournament win against 13 seed Troy in Oklahoma City on Thursday. Hello, everybody, and welcome into this March Madness edition of the Scarlet Shoot-Around Podcast, presented all season long by our title sponsor, Tax and Business Consultants. Make sure to visit them this nearly upcoming tax season at www.taxandbusinessconsultants.com. Mike, maybe not heading into the tournament ideally as you'd like as a Nebraska fan, going 6-6 in their last 12 games, but Nebraska secures a historical top 4 seed, their second highest seed in NCAA tournament history here, as they look to make history again with that first ever tournament win.
And perhaps even more important than the seed line, Blake, is the fact that the Huskers will be heading to Oklahoma City. I was a little nervous. I know you were probably pretty nervous on Selection Sunday as they announced locations, and obviously the Huskers had to be in the last region announced, so it really had made me watch 8 minutes of the selection show just to make sure that we ended up in Oklahoma City. But that is indeed where the Huskers are going, and I'm sure there's going to be a caravan of Husker fans heading down there, like you said, for their opportunity to win their first ever tournament game.
And you're going to be hard-pressed to find any single first and second round site that will have more of a home court advantage than what Nebraska is looking to have in Oklahoma City. But Mike, before we get into the March Madness stuff, let's recap the unfortunate and short-lived Big Ten tournament from Nebraska as they lost to Purdue 74-58. Bryce Sanford went for 15 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists on 6 of 14 shooting, 3 of 8 from deep. He led Nebraska again in scoring, but his 4 rebounds, Mike, is the lowest total for Price since not having any against Iowa on February 17th. Rink Mast went for 11 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists on 4 of 9 shooting, 3 of 8 from deep. And Mike, Rink only having 2 rebounds is a killer for Nebraska at that 5 position, but his 3-point shot did look good for the first time in quite a while. Rink Mast spoke in the postgame about the frustrations that Nebraska has had against Purdue.
Pretty much the same as what they did last time we played. We saw it on film. We knew that we were going to do that, but yeah, they did the same thing they did last time.
And again, Mike, it's a lot of the same problems that we've seen from Nebraska over this last 12-game stretch where, again, they've gone 6-6 in that the Huskers have been unable to really firmly secure the defensive glass against these powerful offensive rebounding opponents.
Yeah, and truthfully, Purdue's just frankly a tough matchup for the Huskers. You know, it's something we mentioned even against UCLA, and we all know how that game ended up. But teams that have a smart point guard that can get into the lane, make passes, teams that are big on the offensive glass like Purdue is, we obviously know what they did in the first matchup. And the Huskers did slightly better in this one, but it still wasn't enough. Frankly, Purdue's a really good 3-point shooting team, and that's always going to be tough for the Huskers and how they want to play defense. So I understand, Rink's frustrations. You never want to lose a game you never want to lose a game, period, but to lose kind of in the same way against the same team twice, that has to be really frustrating to experience, I'm sure. And frankly, Blake, there weren't a lot of bright spots for the Huskers. You already mentioned Price and Rink, and those were the only 2 guys in double digits. You look at the rest of the starters, Sam Hoiberg played 33 minutes in this one, Blake, and he had 5 points, led the team with 8 rebounds, and added 4 assists, but only 1 steal for Sam Hoiberg. And his shooting, Blake, he had a couple more shot attempts in this one, going 2 of 6 from the field, making 1 of his 3-point attempts. And as I mentioned, only having 5 points in this one. Sam had been kind of a bright spot in the offense. You talk about the last 12 games, somebody that really stepped up. Sam had really been that guy, scoring some more points on the offense, helping offset teams focusing on Price Sanford more. But in this one, back to a stat line that I think most of us typically expect of Sam Hoiberg. The 8 rebounds is amazing, Blake, but as I mentioned, just tough all around for the Huskers in this one.
That was followed up by another tough effort from Jamarcus Lawrence, Mike, who went for 6 points, no rebounds, and 1 assist on 2 of 7 shooting, 0 of 4 from deep, 2 of 3 from the line while adding 1 steal. And he has been in quite a funk, Mike, as he has had 3 or more turnovers in 6 of the last 9 games while shooting 23% from deep over that stretch. So Jamarcus Lawrence here potentially only has 1 more data point to try to right the ship. And if he does, Nebraska will be looking good here in the NCAA tournament. Berke Buchtenjel went for 3 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist on 1 of 3 shooting, 1 of 4 from the line. And Mike Berke has really got to find a way to impact the game without scoring, as he's averaging only 3.5 rebounds over his last 6 games. The Huskers desperately will need him to show up on the glass here in March.
Absolutely. And you think back to, that 20-game win streak to start the season, Blake, and we kind of touched on a lot. The thing that makes this team so great, this Husker team so great, is the individual guys doing their job and doing it at a high level. And now that we've seen them, you mentioned they're 6-6 in their last 12. We're starting to see some cracks in that. You mentioned Jamarcus Lawrence, and his turnover numbers are up. His 3-point shooting's down. Like, those are kind of his roles, what he does for the team. You talk about Berke Buchtenjel and how he can impact the game without scoring. I think his defense has still been great. But you're right, Blake. They need more rebounding from Berke. Otherwise, frankly, at times it's tough to play him if he's not going to grab those defensive rebounds, because we all know he doesn't bring a ton on the offensive end, but he's a great defender, and part of that is finishing out those possessions, grabbing those defensive rebounds. So those are 2 guys definitely need to look to see if they can improve their game, like you said, here come March in the tournament. And if they do, I think the Huskers actually have a great chance to make a bit of a run. Looking at some of the bench pieces, Blake, obviously you have to mention Braden Frager, who led bench scoring with 8 points, going 3 of 6 from the field, 1 of 3 beyond the arc, and also adding 1 of 2 free throws. Braden only pulled down 1 rebound, though, Blake. And, another guy whose rebounding numbers are down in this second matchup against Purdue. And Braden also added 1 assist, but he was the lone bright spot, if you can say that, as he did lead the team in plus-minus, Blake, at +9 in his 19 minutes of game time.
And Mike, it really even is hard to find positives in Braden's line, as he scored 6 of his 8 points in the last 3 minutes of the game. He really has not been able to impact the games with his overall bench scoring as of late. We know he's capable of scoring even 20 plus at times. Again, the Huskers, one more aspect of their offensive outlook where they need to find more bench points out of Frager here as we enter the NCAA tournament. Purdue's 2 inside stars, Oscar Clough and Trey Kaufman-Renn, combined to go 10 of 16 from the field for 18 rebounds, 9 of them on the offensive glass. And Mike, those 2 dominated the glass against Nebraska yet again, which highlights and brings us into our first topic, Mike, the issues for Nebraska. Over their first 23 games, Nebraska was elite in protecting the ball, having an offensive turnover percentage under their season average of 14.4% 16 times. In the 9 games since, the Huskers have gone under that 14.4% season average mark only 3 times, and 2 of those games were against Maryland and Rutgers. Fred Hoiberg spoke in the postgame about Nebraska's struggles on the offensive end.
Yeah, like I said, Robin, they were just mindless. And then second half, we had 2. We did a much better job at taking care of the basketball, but, you give them 8 opportunities and the points soft turnover differential in the first half, and then the inability to finish the possession. And then second half, that was the difference. First half, it was the turnovers. Second half, it was the rebounding. So we got to find a way to put 2 halves together if we want any chance of advancing here starting next week.
Sam Hoiberg also spoke to Nebraska's frustrations against Purdue in the postgame.
It's frustrating because a lot of the things that we struggled with today is what we struggled with last time we played them, and that was them being more physical than us. And we knew we had to battle them physically to have a chance, and I think we lost that battle today, so that's why it's so frustrating.
And Mike, Nebraska has never been a great rebounding team, but they've been able to offset that by maximizing their own possessions efficiently on offense. The Huskers probably can't fix the rebounding issues because their play style and personnel are what they are at this point, 32 games in. But they certainly can try to fix their turnover issues that have plagued them here over the last month plus.
And that's, I think, been one of the biggest keys and one of the reasons that this offense has kind of taken a dip as of recent is those turnover numbers, Blake. You mentioned it, this is not a team that crashes the glass. They're not going to fix their offensive rebounding issues. They're hopefully going to be better on the defensive glass, but when you look at this specifically on the offensive end, their only way to generate extra possessions is by turnovers on the defensive end, turning the other team over. They're not going to crash the offensive glass. So if that turnover margin starts to slip, as we see here, the Huskers still did a pretty decent job causing 9 turnovers against Purdue, but they were -1. They had 10 turnovers of their own. This team is not built to win giving up that many turnovers. They're built to win by generating turnovers, and that's how they get their extra offensive possessions and then being efficient with those possessions. When they're giving the ball away, like they have been, like you said, over the last month, this is what you see. It's an offensive performance, 58 points from the Huskers in this one, only 2 guys in double digits. The shooting percentages aren't even horrible. It's just you don't get enough shots. You're giving the ball away too many times, and you're more often than not playing behind in this one, specifically as Purdue led wire to wire, Blake. The issues are what they are at this point. Obviously, we've said it a lot now. The book is out on the Huskers, what you need to do to defend them, what the weak spots are, what the strengths are. And it's up to the coaching staff and the players to make those small adjustments to kind of get back to being that efficient offense that can run as smoothly as we know it can.
And Purdue did exactly that in following the game plan against Nebraska, as the Huskers have not been able to come out of the gate strong. Purdue jumped Nebraska at the tip, putting them in a 13-3 deficit here in the first 5 minutes of this game. And that's been a trend, as Mike talked about, over the past 3 weeks, as Nebraska has trailed in all of their last 5 games at the first media timeout with a, hold your breath here, cumulative score of 50-21 in those 5 games at the first media. After the opening barrage from Purdue, Nebraska played them pretty evenly throughout the rest of the game. But Mike, again, as you mentioned, against Purdue, always playing from the first half. And again, what could have been a huge win for Nebraska, they were unable to supply that second half that we've often seen from this team. But Mike, going forward, first off, Purdue is really good. I mean, Nebraska, even though they were a 2 seed in that Big Ten tournament, they were betting underdogs to the 7 seed Boilermakers, who did go on to actually win the Big Ten tournament. In the grand scheme of things, the Huskers went 26-6 through the regular season and Big Ten tournament, which still did tie the program record for wins in Nebraska history. They were announced as a 4 seed for the NCAA tournament, and I know fans and the program itself were probably hoping for a 3 seed, but as you mentioned earlier in the show, they did get Oklahoma City, which in a lot of ways is more important than what seed line they were on. And the Huskers will look to break the infamous winless curse in the NCAA tournament and win their first ever tournament game here against Troy on Thursday morning.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to touch on, like you said, Purdue's a really good team. Let's not forget this was the number 1 overall team coming into the season, and for good reason. Senior-laden team, guys that have been around a lot. Obviously, Braden Smith's amazing. Trey Kaufman-Wren is a force inside. They have the shooters outside to punish you if you sag off and double too quickly down low and can't recover. So Purdue's is just a tough match. Shocking that they were the 7 seed in the Big Ten, to be honest, but that's just the way that the regular season shook out. And I wouldn't be surprised, Blake, if there's a lot of brackets out there that have Purdue going pretty deep, because again, this is a very solid team. No shame in losing to them. It's a tough matchup for the Huskers. It's against a very high quality opponent. And the good news is they should have an easier quality opponent coming up in their first round, as again, they're a 4 seed going up against a 13 in the Troy Trojans, which we'll obviously preview later in the show.
Wrapping up the Huskers Big Ten tournament, they shot 39% from the field, 32% from deep, 44% on 4 of 9 from the free throw line, while having 15 assists to 10 turnovers. The Purdue Boilermakers on the other side shot 45% from the field, 32% from 3, 86% from the line on 7 of 8, while having 20 assists to 9 turnovers. Again, the Boilermakers really able to move the ball and facilitate well against Nebraska's no-middle defense. Mike, we had 100+ responses on our post-game tweets. Some people positive, some people negative, other people trying to keep the faith. We'll touch on all of it on the other side of the break.
Being charged with a DUI or criminal matter is one of the most stressful moments anyone can face. Your license, career, and reputation may all be on the line, but you don't have to go it alone. At the law office of William M. Kurtenbach, we understand what's at stake. Our attorney has years of experience handling DUI and complex criminal cases, protecting clients' rights, challenging evidence, and fighting for the best possible outcome. Every case deserves a strong defense. Don't wait until it's too late. Call the law office of William M. Kurtenbach today, serving Platte and surrounding counties. Call 402-249-5154 today or visit lawofficeofwmk.com.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shoot-Around Podcast.
Welcome back into the Scarlet Shoot-Around Podcast, presented as always by our title sponsor, Tax and Business Consultants. Make sure to visit them again this tax season for any tax planning, business consulting, or payroll needs you may have at www.taxandbusinessconsultants.com. Mike, this segment, though, sponsored by our friends over at the law office of WMK. And my goodness, if you wouldn't believe it, Fletcher Lawyer, Mike, went for a team-high 19 points for Purdue in their second win this season against Nebraska. I tell you what, Mike, if you need a lawyer of your own to help your legal team defense in a court of law, we have the lawyer for you.
Obviously, Purdue has an amazing lawyer on their squad. As you mentioned, leading them in points in this one. He's been a huge part of their run to the Big Ten title. And Blake's right. If you need a high-quality lawyer to help your team, we know who to contact. Reach out to the law office of WMK, and they'll help take care of you.
Thanks again to our friends over at the law office of WMK. Make sure to reach out to them if you need any legal assistance at www.lawofficeofwmk.com. Okay, Mike, let's get into it. Our favorite segment, we call it Let's Hear From You, where we share a tweet at the final buzzer of every game asking Huskers fans what their thoughts were on each win and each loss. We pick our favorites, and again, Mike, we had 100+ responses. We're going to go through as many as we efficiently can, and we'll start with Clyde Skemp, who very simply says, ass. Tyler Husker Hoops 402 says, yikes. NU Roundball says, poor effort. Dalton League says, we're frauds. And Cornfed Grizzly says, I'm sad again. And I tell you what, Mike, I'm not going to go so far as to say we're frauds. It's hard to be 26-6 and be a fraud. But again, it's a lot of, anytime you hear fraud stuff, it's more so about recency bias, like what have you done for me lately type of thing. You know, we posted a tweet actually today about share your favorite memories, you know, of Nebraska's season. And you go back and look at them, and most of them are from the first 2/3 of the season, which, you know, you almost forget some of those moments happened this season because they're almost 2 to 3 months old at this point. But think back to how fun that Pentagon game was. Think back to how huge that Michigan State win was. Goes without saying the Illinois win at the buzzer, right? So many great moments, but it goes to show again, Nebraska has not had a great moment like that in a long time. And amongst the couple wins that the Huskers have had, you know, the Iowa win is the highlight at home, and that went to overtime. So we've talked about it a ton on this show about how, you know, this team maybe isn't playing to their ceiling. Not to say that they've peaked necessarily, but they've certainly played down to where we've seen them play over the course of this season. Now that can change, Mike, but they only one game left to prove it.
Yeah, you gotta prove it because it's win or go home. From here on out, again, I agree with you, Blake. I'm not going to say that the Huskers are frauds. Obviously, they're not playing their best basketball of the year at this point. But let's not forget, Blake, even in those, you know, a couple of those losses, you think about the Purdue loss at home, not this last one in the Big Ten tourney, but the Purdue loss at home in PBA, had a free throw to win it at the end, right? You think about the Michigan game on the road, you know, you lose by a couple, down 2 huge pieces. It's so easy to say they went 6-6, they're not looking good, but Blake, you know, that's 2 opportunities right there. If you flip those, they go 8-4 in their last with a couple of massive wins, and suddenly, you know, we're probably talking about a 3 seed, maybe even 2 seed Nebraska, depending on how everything else shakes out. So to say this team is frauds or they're bad, I think that's just, again, a bit of a recency bias overreaction. Again, nobody likes losing by nearly 20, but Purdue's a bad matchup. They're a really good team. That stuff happens in college basketball, and that's just the sport. Frank Mast said, Purdue is just a really bad matchup. Nothing to overreact, just get it done in the dance. Couldn't have said it better myself. Husker Haley said, bad matchup, but Nebraska did not play well at all. It's going to be a long 2 days waiting for our seeding and matchup. I still have faith for the NCAA tournament right now. Husker Hero said, Purdue was a bad matchup. They came off a really well-played game against Northwestern. D. Burritt said, just disappointing that it's the postseason and not everyone looks like they wanted to be there last night. I don't mind losing and Purdue isn't a favorable matchup, but they didn't compete. Winning an NCAA game is still possible, but something's going on with some of the players. We're back, Co said. Football has trained us well for this type of letdown over the last 20 years. 'Tis but a scratch. And then Ruler of Husker Nation said, everyone needs to relax. Purdue is a nightmare for us. We now get a week of rest and will play a 14 seed in OKC. Close. We will have home court advantage for 2 rounds. We are winning that tourney game and building the father-son statue, which would be, I think, pretty cool to see, Blake. Obviously, these guys all repeated basically what I was just saying. Purdue's a tough matchup for the Huskers. It's a very, very good team. The concerning thing is when people are saying some of the players looked like they didn't want to be there. Now, Blake, I didn't think that there was really a lack of effort in this game against Purdue. I didn't really see it. The one thing that stood out to me, though, and maybe it is, some people say it is, a lot of the 50-50 balls, loose balls, there are a lot of times that balls got, swatted out of Purdue players' hands, and it just happens to go to a Purdue player. That's a turnover. Sometimes it turns into an open 3. More often than not in this one, it seemed like when the Huskers generated a chance for a turnover, Purdue ended up getting that ball back and converting on it. So not only were the Huskers giving away turnovers, they weren't generating as many as they possibly could have. So it is a little alarming. And like I said, maybe some people say that those 50-50 balls kind of points to a lack of effort, but really sometimes that's just, how the ball rolls, how the ball bounces, how the cookie crumbles. And in this one, it just didn't seem to go right for the Huskers anywhere.
Yeah, I don't think it was certainly a lack of effort or anything like that, but the issue is truly when you look at Nebraska's 6 losses, one of the huge commonalities is that the Huskers are facing some kind of elite facilitating offense. You look at UCLA with Donovan Dent, a great facilitator. You look at, obviously, Braden Smith was the point man for 2 of the losses for Nebraska against Purdue. You look at Illinois, who has all-world NBA lottery pick Keaton Wagler running the point, who's a great passer in and of his own right. And it just goes to show that that is kind of the formula to beating Nebraska. That's not necessarily a scheme thing from that perspective, but it's a personnel thing. And a team that's able to move the ball well against Nebraska is probably going to have a lot of success because of all the help that this defense is built to have. So, does that mean that Nebraska is a bad team? Not necessarily. Does it mean they played a bad game? Yeah, that's independent of the matchup, no doubt about it. But, you talk about Nebraska's defense, again, they're going to hit certain teams that are just going to be a bad matchup. That happens. It's Nebraska's offense that's the real cause for concern, right? Because Nebraska, and again, we've talked about it multiple times. The book is out. Everybody kind of knows how to defend Nebraska. That's probably not necessarily going to carry over to the NCAA tournament because league coaches talk all the time. League coaches probably text each other. League coaches have conferences and stuff like that. I mean, I'm assuming a lot of them are friends of each other. This stuff gets around pretty quick, and they're all really, really, really smart coaches. And that's not to say that the head coach of the Troy Trojans, Scott Cross, is not a great head coach or anything like that, but they're just talking about guys that are paid at elite levels to do their jobs in the Big Ten, up and down, top to bottom. It's a really good coaching league. Nebraska is in theory going to go up against a Troy team here in the first round in the Sun Belt. And in the next round, if they're lucky enough to win, then they're going to play either a team from the Southland Conference or the SEC. Now, obviously, the SEC, I'm sure, has great coaches as well. And Vanderbilt was a great team this year as well. They nearly won the SEC title, but they haven't seen Nebraska necessarily all year. They haven't followed them. They don't necessarily know the weaknesses. And especially in a game where you're going to have 1 day of prep, install, review, and all that stuff, it's going to be hard to match up to what Nebraska does on offense. So, maybe I'm just being a little bit too optimistic in that sense, but Nebraska's offense in a tournament setting, not a Big Ten tournament setting, but a separate tournament setting like the NCAA tournament, I think it's going to potentially pose a lot of problems for opposing teams. You hope that Nebraska, again, can get by Troy with, maybe not having the right athletes to take on a Big Ten team and so on and so forth. But again, on that 2-day turnaround, Mike, it's going to be hard to scout Nebraska, not just on offense and what they're trying to do, but defense as well. Todd Peters says, play Frager more. Whizbang Hoops says, Fred lost that game with the extended Garcia minutes over both Frager and Burke when we'd gotten the game close. Landon Keim says, I love Jamar, but he has been off for at least a month. Need more minutes for Frager and Kale and less Jamar next week. Hate to say it. Jim C said, need more from Frager so that Garcia plays less or not at all. Unlikely to beat a 6, which, assuming we're a 3, which we're a 4, so in this case it'd be a 5, to get to the second weekend, but the first ever tournament win is close to a lock. Jack Crumley said, Burke is downright unplayable on the offensive end, and Garcia's turnovers negate any offense he provides. Wish we would have given Leo more of an opportunity throughout the season, but I guess at this point we flush this and hope to get a good draw and get hot for the tournament. Dean Biltoft said, can we try starting Frager over Burke? Because I would want a transfer if cardio minutes Burke was playing more than me. Fraudy said, if I had to choose between watching Oscar Clough and Jared Garcia playing a 1v1 or claw my eyes out, I'd claw my eyes out. Look, we're not going to be attacking any players or anything like that on the podcast. But what I can tell you is that it is really hard for Nebraska to succeed getting the kind of production or lack thereof that they're getting out of guys like Burke Buchtengill, out of guys like Braden Frager, out of guys that are in a lot of ways, Mike, having a negative impact in Jamarcus Lawrence if you just look at the stats. And that's not anything against them personally, but the stats lead to results and the results lead to wins, right? So, Jamarcus Lawrence, we've kind of talked about a little bit, has had a huge turnover problem. Again, 3+ turnovers in 6 of his last 9 games. You look at Burke, Mike, only averaging 3.5 rebounds over his last 6 games. Like, I loved what you mentioned in the opening segment. Nebraska is at its best, not because they're great individual pieces necessarily, but because those guys are doing their jobs at an elite level. Burke is getting 7 to 8 rebounds and maybe getting 7 points. You've got Jamarcus Lawrence notching 6 assists and maybe 1 turnover. You've got Braden Frager that's coming off the bench providing 16 points. And as of recent, before the last couple games, providing a bunch of contributions on the glass with 7 to 8 rebounds himself. Nebraska hasn't gotten it from those guys. And because of that, Price Sanford's trying to get this team over the hump with, again, scoring a ton of points and trying to, get a bunch of volume to get there. But again, that's not what Nebraska needs to win in March. They've got to have these even contributions across the board, and they just have not been getting that here as of late.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep it pretty short and simple. I like what you said there at the end, Blake. This team is the best when they get the contributions from everybody. This is not a team designed, and although they've played a handful of games that way, it's not designed to have Price Sanford go for 30 with a couple of guys chipping in 5, 6, 7 points here or there. It's meant to be 3, 4 guys in double digits, balanced scoring, and that keeps defenses honest. So on that aspect, again, I'm not going to call it any specific players. It's pretty simple, Blake. The starters need to play better. The bench needs to play better. Everybody needs to play better on the offensive end because it hasn't been up to the level that we know they can play at. We saw it earlier this year. And like you touched on previously, obviously it's tough in the Big Ten. It's a whole nother season, basically, where you mentioned it. The coaches talk, word gets around and on what, we did well against them, what worked for us, what didn't, what their weakness is. So getting into, like you said, fresh teams that haven't necessarily been focused on Nebraska or even, conference opponents. They've been worried about the Sun Belt. They've been worried about the South and the SEC, whatever it is. Not so worried about what's going on in the Big Ten. So, and while these coaches obviously are very good basketball minds, that's why they're head coaches at D1 schools. There is a time crunch, as Blake mentioned. You have a one-day turnaround. Obviously for this first round game on Thursday, you have a handful of days here, which can help you a bit. But again, it's not a ton to prep, install an entirely new team and system that you haven't even seen at all. Even when you think about Big Ten, Blake, like year to year, stuff doesn't really change, right? The Fred Hoiberg team is going to kind of look like a Fred Hoiberg team year over year. There's going to be little changes here or there. You think about like a Tom Izzo team. They kind of look like a Tom Izzo team. They play really good defense. They're athletic. They normally have a really good point guard spread, whatever. It kind of looks the same. These teams don't play Nebraska year in, year out and don't just kind of have that general feel. So getting that game plan in is going to be a little tough. And hopefully with that being said, those contributions can come and be more evenly distributed and we can get back to what we saw during that 20-game win streak that made the Huskers so successful. Josh Tomjack said, I laugh at all the flush it responses, like Nebraska is going to magically fix offensive liabilities, lack of size and athleticism, poor confidence, soft post play, etc., etc. Dan Holden said, hard to play when one team gets to be as physical as they want, shoving, elbows to the rink's head, obvious shoving, and the other team can't even box out for a rebound without a whistle. Really tough. CDJ80 said, tough matchup that amplifies where they need to improve next year. More physicality, stronger around the basket, and better rebounding. We just struggle immensely against big physical teams. Brian Siebel said, Nebraska blueprint is out there. Play physical D against the 3. We lack the dudes to create enough offense in other ways. Still cheering GBR all the way. Scott said, I expected it. Nebraska has been exploited in the last part of the season. They're scrappy, but no physicality down low, and Mast has struggled. Frager not the same since his injury. We may win one tourney game, but that's it. And the Husker Edge said, tough to watch poor basketball after winning 26 games. We can't overcome our small size and turnover issues if we can't shoot the three. We've shown weaknesses when Price is locked down. If Kale doesn't step up and provide more offense, we will not go far in the NCAA tournament. Blake, it's a lot of not so positive talk from the fans here in this section, and rightfully so. This is, again, the mistakes, the weaknesses of this team are well known. They're out there. This is not a good offensive rebounding team, generally rebounding team. This is not a good offensive rebounding team. They can get bullied on the defensive glass, especially by teams that are big and physical. You think about Oscar Clough and what he's able to do, Trey Kaufman-Renn in this Purdue game specifically. But even beyond that, we've seen it throughout against teams like Illinois, Michigan, teams that are big. Now, are there a lot of teams in the country that are as big as Purdue, Illinois, and Michigan? Not really. So is that worry overblown? Maybe slightly, but again, it is definitely a glaring weakness of this team. The turnover issues have obviously been a problem over the last month plus. The Huskers need to take care of the ball because they're just not good enough on the offensive end or defensive end to give the ball away as often as they have been. And that's, again, why you see these offensive numbers trending down for them. Again, a lot of negativity, a lot of people saying they're lucky if they win one, maybe they'll win one and that's it. I'm not going to go that far. This is still a really good team. It's still a 4 seed. That's a top 16 seed. This is still a team that's going to play in an arena in Oklahoma City that's going to be packed with Husker fans. It's going to be very loud. I think there's going to be a lot of energy for that. And at the end of the day, it's a team that finished second in the regular season in the Big Ten. And you don't just fluke your way into that, right? This is a good team. There are weaknesses. Other teams exploit those weaknesses. Like I said, make those small changes, make those tiny adjustments, and get back to their winning ways. And I don't doubt that they can do it, Blake. But again, it's one game at a time now. You have to do it this next game, or else you're packing your bags and heading to Lincoln.
Yeah, and I think Husker Edge laid it out perfectly in the sense of kind of giving everything context. He said it's tough to watch poor basketball after winning 26 games because we know the Huskers' ceiling. We saw it, and I think it was evident up in Ann Arbor when Nebraska shorthanded 2 of their best players in Rink Mast and Braden Frager, led the Michigan Wolverines, a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, the number 2 overall seed, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 3rd. For 36 minutes. I mean, that is the ceiling of this team. We know that they can do it. So to see them play a team like Purdue, obviously Purdue's a great team. They beat Nebraska twice. They actually beat Michigan to win that Big Ten tournament. But you see a team expose Nebraska to the level of we saw 18 points here. We saw UCLA beat them by nearly 20 points. And it's what is going on? Well, Nebraska played so well over those first 20 games that you really started to see them kind of hit that ceiling. Now you play a team like Purdue that has so many seniors, that has one of the best point guards in the country, that has really physical bigs and Kaufman-Renn at Clough that can really crash the glass. And you look at a team like that and you say, when they're playing their best basketball, they're unbeatable. There's very few teams in the country that can beat that team. Now, when Nebraska is playing their best basketball, they're still going to be exposed on the glass a little bit. They just don't have the bodies to do it. So you go back to what we talked about in that first segment of Nebraska's weaknesses right now are on the glass and in the offensive turnover realm. Nebraska is going to have a really hard time fixing their rebounding issues because it's just personnel and play style based. Nebraska isn't running an offensive style that's meant to crash the glass. They're trying to get back on defense to not get beat in transition. Do they need to do it all the time? Maybe, maybe not. But that's just the way that this team has been built mentally. That's how they decided that they want to play the game this season, right? That doesn't mean that you can't fix the turnover problems. That's what's so frustrating about this. Now, they did a great job in that second half, Mike, with only 2 second half turnovers. So you talk about maybe little places you can take momentum. They took much better care of the ball in that second half against Purdue. But 8 first half turnovers, digging yourself into that 13-3 hole in the first 5 minutes of the game and trying to play catch up the rest of the way, that's just not sustainable, especially in a win or go home environment in March Madness. That cannot happen. So you have to hope that the Huskers find a way to figure it out. The good news is we know what their ceiling is. That doesn't mean they're perfect. Again, even at their ceiling, they're going to have some weaknesses in the sense that they're probably not going to win the glass a ton, especially against a physical team. But the peak of this Husker team is shooting the ball great, facilitating the ball great, taking care of the ball, 7 or fewer turnovers, something in that realm, and maximizing their offensive possessions with good looks. If they're able to do that, they can beat almost everybody they play. And they prove that in Ann Arbor. They prove that by winning in Champaign. They prove that by beating Michigan State. They prove that by winning down in Kansas City 2 games. They prove that by beating Oklahoma at the Pentagon and everybody else that they've beaten. They can play good basketball. We just haven't necessarily seen them play it as of recent. That doesn't mean the ceiling is non existent. It just means they've got to figure it out here on Thursday because it might be their last chance. Go Big Redcast says, at least they'll be well rested, which is true. Dr. Abby something said, bad matchup, bad shooting, flat energy. External things exist, but we didn't play like a 2 seed. Jeff Neal says, I'm relieved we won't be a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. I would not want to have to play Furman in the first round. There's a bright side to this. Huskers Oracle said, I had dreams of hoisting a Big Ten trophy, but to no avail. Good Big Ten teams like Purdue have our defense figured out. The NCAA tournament should be different. Really need to get Burke, Frager, and Lawrence going. They are killing us. Need a simple 7-man rotation in the tournament. All is in front of us yet. Jacob Barton says, terrible matchup. The refs gave them no favors, as usual, and we had too many turnovers in the first half to even give ourselves a fighting chance. Flush it and find out who we're playing Thursday, Troy, and get the win at all costs. Hashtag GBR. Again, these were shared before the tournament draw was announced. Joel Schaefer said, pray for a good draw. I think we got one. Just win one next week. All focus should be on that one goal. Motai24 says, NCAA tourney, here we come. Heads up, go win the next one. Hashtag GBR, and his dream of hashtag tourney team came true. Bama Husker said, go win in the tournament that matters. And Chad Balcom says, like many Nebraska ball fans, I got drawn in for the Creighton game. Thought the bubble would burst against Wisconsin to start conference play. It's been a magical ride, but it's really going to hurt when the clock strikes midnight, and today it got a lot closer, GBR. And kind of a double entendre there in the sense that Nebraska then got closer because they continue to play relatively poor basketball to what we've seen them able to do this year, but also, Mike, because this truly might be the last game we get to see of this team. And again, you cannot forget, as frustrated as you might be in the short term recent with this team, this is one of the best, if not the best team in Husker history. They have an opportunity to prove that here in Oklahoma City by making not just a 1-game run, Mike, but they have every chance in the world to be a Sweet 16 team. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to play Vanderbilt, a hot Vanderbilt team at that, that's right now in the top 10 of Bart Torvik. But McNeese State could upset that team, and that's not to say that they can't beat Nebraska, but there's no guarantee Nebraska would hypothetically play Vanderbilt if they beat Troy. You know, you never really know how these things are going to go, but I just want to stress that no matter what happens here on Thursday, obviously we all want a Husker win, but really soak it in and understand that if things go south, this could be it for one of the best Husker teams, again, if not the best Husker team in program history. So my call to action is to every single Husker fan that's, you know, going down to Oklahoma City, or even at that, watching at home, watching at a bar, whatever you might be doing. Cheer with all your heart, soak in every single moment. Huskers have only been in the NCAA tournament for 8 times in the past. This is their 9th tournament berth in their entire history. These things don't come around very often. We're hoping that that changes, but in the current context of what this is a very, very historical moment for this program, and to soak in every single moment and leave it all out there in the stands, just like the players will on the court.
And I know I'm not alone. Obviously, everybody wants to get the monkey off the back, break the curse. And Blake, everyone wants to do that because, you know, nobody wants to be the last team known for not winning a tournament game. But the real reason I want them to win a game is because this constant discourse, like you said, we just had a historic season, quite possibly the best season in Nebraska basketball history. And none of that matters if they don't win a tournament game, which is justified, but also a little bit ridiculous, right? If they won back in the 90s, we'd all be sitting here going, wow, second in the Big Ten, awesome. They got a 4 seed. That's great. You know, hopefully they can make a little bit of noise. But now it's like, oh, if they don't win on Thursday, the season's a failure. The sky's falling. And it's just so hard because, like I said, it's justified, right? You don't want to be the last team. You want to win this game, and it means a lot. But it's so hard to compare that with the fact that they went 26-6. They were the 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament. Like, this is a historically good Nebraska basketball team. And a lot of fans just seem to not care because if they don't win one single game at the end of the year. We've been here through 32 games, Blake. It's been a really incredible ride. There's been a lot of highs. Recently, there's been a couple of lows. But it's more than just this last game, but the last game is so important, and I understand that as a Husker fan too. So it's tough. I hope that they get the monkey off their back so that if there is another season like this, we're not sitting here after 32 games going, well, hopefully they win this one or else it was all for nothing, right? And not to mention how hard that has to be for this team, right? Obviously, it's amazing. This is a senior-laden team. They're very mature. Hopefully they can handle it. I'm sure they can. They've handled a lot of adversity this season. But, sitting there, getting ready for this game this week, they got to be like, shit, man, we got to win this one or what's it all for? Where their mind should be, let's win this one and then win the next one and go make some noise in the tournament, right? Instead of having all this pressure for the entire state on their shoulder to just win this single game. So praying for them. Hopefully they can do it. Obviously, I think they can. Again, having a 4 seed really helps a lot, getting a favorable matchup. And we're going to preview that matchup on the other side of the break. The Troy Trojans, Blake, coming in from the Sun Belt Conference, the Sun Belt Conference champs. If you're all in on Nebraska sports, you've got to check out 2cmerch.com. They've got Nebraska-themed apparel for all sports with design rooted in heritage, deep meaning, and true fans in mind. Whether it's game day or you're showing your loyalty year-round, 2C Merch has you covered, so make sure to visit them at twocmerch.com because great fans deserve great shirts.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shoot-Around Podcast.
Welcome back into the Scarlet Shoot-Around Podcast, sponsored as always by our title sponsor, Tax and Business Consultants. If you want to make sure you are taken care of this tax season, make sure to reach out to them at www.taxandbusinessconsultants.com. This segment, though, Mike, sponsored by our friends over at 2C Merch. Dusty and his team create a bunch of custom apparel for Husker fans around the country, most notably based in Lincoln, Nebraska, with designs, Mike, really based in uniqueness, with tech stuff, with historical context, with things for football, baseball, basketball. The creators of the Hoiberg moniker. They really have everything you could ever be looking for. If you need something at this point, you might need to get overnight shipping, but you can find it at 2cmerch.com.
Yeah, Blake, I think if you're trying to get your Hoiberg stuff now, it's a little late for that. The good news is they don't just do basketball. They got all the Husker athletics covered, so they got baseball stuff as we get into baseball season. Obviously, being in Nebraska, it's a football-crazed state, so they have football stuff. Go ahead and check them out because they got stuff for every sport, like I said, and they got your back no matter what you need.
Thanks again to 2C Merch for sponsoring us here on the Scarlet Shoot-Around. Make sure to visit them again at www.twocmerch.com. Okay, Mike, let's get into the Troy Trojans, who are 22-11 on the year, 12-6 in conference. They qualified for the NCAA tournament after winning the Sun Belt Conference tournament, going 2-0 with, I think it was like a septuple bye or something like that. So they only played 2 games to have to get there. They were also the regular season champions, so technically very deserving of their spot regardless in the NCAA tournament. The Troy Trojans are number 125 in the net, so not that it matters, but this technically in the grand scheme of things would be a Q3 neutral site game for the Huskers. The Trojans were picked 4th in the preseason Sun Belt poll, but again, as mentioned, they finished 1st. They're also 1st in the Sun Belt KenPom predictive ratings. Head coach Scott Cross, the Sun Belt Conference Coach of the Year, is in his 7th year at Troy and his 19th overall, with a career record of 350 and 259 for a 58% win percentage. This will be his 3rd NCAA tournament appearance of his D1 coaching career after reaching the round of 64 with Troy last year. Notable results for the Trojans include beating number 64 Akron, a tournament team, a 12 seed at home, 79-69. They did lose to common Husker opponent number 304 West Georgia, 93-89 in double overtime at home. They beat number 48 San Diego State, the highest ranked KenPom team they beat of the year, in double overtime, 108-107 on the road. And they did lose to another common opponent, number 80 USC, on the road, 107-106 in triple overtime. So, Mike, the Troy Trojans have a tendency to force games to overtime. Let's hope they don't do that against Nebraska. Offensively, they rank 141st nationally and 2nd in the Sun Belt. Defensively, they're 166th nationally and 5th in the Sun Belt Conference. Mike, where do you want to start with the Sun Belt's finest, Troy Trojans?
Sun Belt's finest. I like that, Blake. As is tradition, We're going to look at the offensive end, but first, just some overall notes on the Troy team. This is a team that plays a very slow game, Blake, as they're 309th nationally, and they were 12th in the Sun Belt in tempo, and a lot of that is due to their long offensive possession, as they ranked 240th on the offensive end, taking over 18 seconds per possession on average. The other note, Blake, this is not a deep team. They pretty much play a 5, maybe 6-man rotation. It's, there's not going to be a lot of bench minutes to go around, as they rank 335th in D1 in bench minutes. So when we go over their starters, those are pretty much the guys you're going to see on the court the entire time. Looking at their offense, Blake, they're not a necessarily great shooting team, especially when you look at their three-point shooting, as they ranked 219th nationally, shooting 32.8% from beyond the arc. They are slightly better inside the arc, though, as they ranked 96th nationally there at 53.5%. When they work inside, Blake, they choose to work very close to the hoop. They truly are looking only for layups, as they ranked 10th nationally and first in the Sun Belt in average 2-point distance at 4.4 feet. However, while they only shoot close to the hoop, they don't generate a lot of fouls, as they rank 147th nationally in free throw attempted per field goal attempted. Last two notes here I have, Blake, is one, this is a team that is prone to giving the ball away, as they ranked 202nd nationally in offensive turnover percentage at about 16%. That would have been about 11th in the Big Ten for reference, about the same as Minnesota, just to give you kind of a point of reference. Some bad news for the Huskers, Blake. This is a good offensive rebounding team. They rank 55th nationally in offensive rebounding percentage, grabbing down an offensive rebound on 36% of missed shots. That would have ranked 4th in the Big Ten, right between Michigan and Maryland, just for a point of reference for you.
As you mentioned, they're very shallow with their bench minutes, but a lot of that stems from their experience, as this team has played a lot together, ranking 37th nationally in minutes continuity from last year's tournament team. They're also, to the fear of Husker fans, Mike, a pretty good ball movement offense that ranks 70th nationally and led the Sun Belt in assist rate at 57%. Their offense is led by point guard number 3, Cooper Campbell, a 6'1 sophomore, averaging 13 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists on 43% shooting, 39% from beyond the arc, while adding 1.6 steals a game. He's a balanced scorer, a good shooter, was 5th in the Sun Belt in steals, and erupted for 32 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists in that triple overtime buzzer beater loss to USC here earlier this year. He'll be flanked, actually, Mike, by his brother, shooting guard number 2, Kobe Campbell, a 6'2 junior, averaging 9 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists on 42% shooting, 40% from deep, while adding 1 steal. A much lower usage guy, but a huge 3-point threat, as he scored 30 points against Southern Miss in January. Since then, though, Mike, he has been in single-digit scoring in 8 of his last 9 games.
Yeah, honestly, Blake, really cool that the Trojans have a couple of brothers playing in the backcourt. I'm sure they have a pretty solid connection there. As we look towards their front court, it's led by number 1, Thomas Dowd, a 6'8 junior forward, who was the Sun Belt Tournament MVP this year, Blake. He ranks 7th in the Sun Belt in offensive rebounding, 9th in the Sun Belt in defensive rebounding, 12th in the Sun Belt in block percentage. And Blake, he plays 90% of minutes for the Trojans, so he's going to be on the court a lot. So far this season, Dowd is averaging 15 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, while adding 1 steal and 1 block to his stat line. He's shooting 45% from the floor, 34% from beyond the arc, and 80% at the free throw line. His front court mate, number 11, Victor Valdez, 6'8 junior forward, who is a very high usage guy, Blake, as he ranked 2nd in the Sun Belt, and he ranks 33rd nationally in possession percentage. So that's the number of possessions while he's on the floor, ending with him. But even though he's a high usage guy, he's actually pretty good at distributing the ball, Blake, as he was 2nd in the Sun Belt, and he ranks 62nd nationally in assist rate. He's one of the few Troy Trojans that's really good at getting to the line, Blake, as he ranked 1st in the Sun Belt and 55th nationally in fouls drawn this year. Valdez is averaging 15 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists, while also adding 1 steal per game, shooting 40% from the field, a paltry 22% from beyond the arc, and 76% from the free throw line.
As you look at Thomas Dowd, Mike, he was a first-team all-Sun Belt selection while averaging a double-double with those 15 points and 10 rebounds. He also led the Sun Belt in rebounds per game. And on top of all that, Mike, he's also a stretch four that will shoot a decent amount. You mentioned Victor Valdez, the 6'7 junior, more of a point forward build, as he was second in the Sun Belt in assist rate with that 6'7 frame and first in the conference, as you mentioned, in fouls drawn. He's had 10 or more points in 27 of Troy's 33 games this year. Rounding out their starters, center number 10, Gerald Bellamy, a 6'9 senior averaging 8 points and 4 rebounds, shooting 65% from the field, 30% from deep while adding a block. He is a highly efficient inside scorer as he's shooting 68% from inside the arc, ranking 52nd nationally in that stat, and is their second best defender per Bart Torvik's defensive box score plus minus. Sixth man, Mike, number 33, Theo Sang, a 6'9 senior averaging 13 points, 6 rebounds, 1 assist on 52% shooting, 32% from deep. He's missed the last 6 games with a knee injury, but does seem probable to play per an interview with head coach Scott Cross. He's a good rebounder who works inside that can also shoot as well. As we turn to the defensive side, Mike, Troy sells out to defend the three, holding opponents to 31% from deep, which is 43rd nationally and led the Sun Belt. But their inside defense suffers, as that ranks 197th nationally and 12th in the Sun Belt. They also do a decent job forcing turnovers, ranking 107th nationally in defensive steal percentage at 10%, while being 164th nationally in defensive turnover percentage at 16.9%.
Yeah, you got it spot on, Blake. Again, this is a team that's really going to defend the three-point line, but very weak inside. Another part of that, possibly due to their relatively short height, is that this is a poor defensive rebounding team, as they rank 234th, and they were 9th in the Sun Belt in defensive rebounding. Blake, they don't foul much either, though, as they rank 105th nationally, and they were 4th in the Sun Belt in free throw attempted per field goal attempted. Again, that's not a big factor when the Huskers play because they don't draw a lot of fouls. And then when you look at how teams are really scoring on the Troy Trojans, Blake, a lot of it is really coming from the inside, as we mentioned, with their shooting splits that they're giving up on the defense. You look at their point distribution, they're 263rd, and they were 10th in three-point distribution. Again, the higher number here means that fewer points are coming from that shot. Their two-point distribution is good for 60th nationally and was second in the Sun Belt. So teams really electing to go inside. And as I mentioned, they don't give up a lot of free throws, as they're 252nd nationally and 12th in the Sun Belt in free throw point distribution. So Blake, it's pretty clear to me that teams in the Sun Belt elected to attack Troy inside and take advantage of that relatively weak interior defense.
Ken Pom projects a 77-61 Nebraska win, whereas Bart Torvik projects a 76-61 Nebraska win. So, Mike, the predictive metrics expecting roughly a 15.5-point win for Nebraska. That said, for the first time this year, we will be picking against an official spread, which lists Nebraska as only a 13.5-point favorite. I'm 18-14 on the year. You are 11-21, and the fans are 19-12-1. As 76% of fans took Nebraska plus 4.5 the same way that we did. Mike, Nebraska has an opportunity to win their first ever NCAA tournament game in program history, but will they win it by 14 points is the question.
I'm just going to start off by saying something I never thought I'd say about my picks. I'm so happy I got to double digit of picks right, and that's really sad to say when it comes to having 30 plus picks. But again, that's why I don't sports bet, because I'm obviously not very good at this. Blake, as you mentioned, the predictives have this at 15.5. It's already been bet to 13.5. So the sharp money's on the Trojans, and that's because I think this could be kind of a tough matchup for Nebraska, as Troy really defends the three well. They crash the offensive glass, and as you mentioned, they move the ball well on offense. The question mark I have, though, Blake, is that the Trojans like to shoot the three ball quite a bit. We didn't touch on that, but they're 54th in three-point rate with 46% of their shots coming beyond the arc, and they're not very good at shooting the three. So a bit of a head-scratcher there on their offensive end. I touched on the fact that the Trojans are prone to giving up turnovers. The Huskers should be able to create a lot of turnovers, as that is a calling card of this Husker defense. And Blake, perhaps the biggest thing you mentioned, this would be a Q3 game. The Huskers have not lost any game that's not Q1 this year, and I am knocking on my wooden desk as I say that. All that being said, Blake, this one's going to be a little bit closer than people hope. It will be within the 14. I have the Huskers winning this one 75 to 64, 11-point win. I will be taking the Trojans to cover, Huskers to get their first ever NCAA tournament win.
And Mike, with his 33% hit rate this year, does take the Troy Trojans to cover, which has to be a good thing if you are a sports bettor on the Fade Mike train. The Huskers entered the NCAA tournament field for only the third time in 31 years, with their second highest seed in program history. And they got a little bit lucky with their first round draw, pulling a 13 seed that predictive metrics view as worse than 2 of the 14 seeds in the bracket. The Trojans do pose some issues, most glaringly on the offensive glass and on perimeter defense, so this will be no cakewalk for Nebraska despite that high spread. But with the program importance of this game, the number one goal of this season is on the doorstep, and I expect Nebraska to make history. That said, I'm also going to take Troy with the points, the plus 13.5, projecting a Nebraska 73-62 win. The Troy Trojans do cover. I'm not going to be betting the Huskers, but I am going to bet on them winning their first ever NCAA tournament game in program history. That is our Troy preview, and we will get you out of here on the other side of the break.
If you or someone you love has been hiding their smile, struggling with dentures, or putting off dental implants because of cost, this one's for you. Main Street Dental in El Dorado, Kansas, just outside of Wichita, is offering exclusive discounts for Nebraska ball fans, and they're even willing to help cover a hotel stay, despite being about 4 hours away. Dr. Nolan Andrews and his team are considered one of the top full arch implant centers in the region, specializing in full arch, all on X, and single dental implants. If you've been saying someday, or you know a family member or friend struggling to smile or eat, tell them to call Main Street Dental at 316-321-4222 and ask about the Nebraska ball fan implant program.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shoot-Around Podcast.
Welcome back into the Scarlet Shoot-Around Podcast, presented as always by our title sponsor, Tax and Business Consultants. Make sure to visit them this tax season for any tax planning, business consulting, or payroll needs you may have at www.taxandbusinessconsultants.com. Our outro segment, though, Mike, sponsored by Dr. Nolan Andrews over at Main Street Dental in El Dorado, Kansas, providing a full service of dental capabilities, but specializing in dental implants. If you or a loved one need any dental work, just head down to El Dorado and give them a call at 316-321-4222, while making sure to mention that you're a Nebraska ball fan for a special discount. Thanks again to Nolan and his team down at Main Street Dental for sponsoring us here on the Scarlet Shoot-Around Podcast. Mike, we've done 32 separate previews for the Huskers basketball team this season, but none bigger than, ironically, the Troy Trojans. Because in a lot of people's eyes, Mike, no matter what Nebraska accomplished in those first 32 games this year, much of it will be moot if they're not able to capitalize on this fantastic season and end it the right way with their first ever win in March.
Yeah, it's just wild that, as you mentioned, the Sun Belt champs Troy Trojans end up being the biggest game of the year, not Creighton, not Wisconsin, not on the road in Ann Arbor. No, it's Oklahoma City against 13 seed Troy Trojans, Sun Belt champs. The team's goals still ahead of them, Blake. They made the tournament. They have a chance to get hot at the right time and make a run. It can happen to any team, and this team, as you mentioned early in the episode, when they play their best basketball, they're good enough to beat anybody. It remains to be seen if that same team's going to come out in Oklahoma City. I sure hope it does, because it is really fun to watch that team, and they could absolutely make some noise in the tournament if they do.
Make sure to follow the show on Apple or Spotify. Take a quick second to rate us 5 stars and share us with a Nebraska basketball friend that may be headed down to Oklahoma City. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Scarlet Shoot Pod for giveaways, short-form videos, in-game tweets, bracket updates, and as always, a chance to be featured on the middle segment of our show. Finally, visit us online at scarletshootaround.com for all podcasts, game stories, travel journals, and if you'd like to support us, our very own merch store. Mike, the stage is set. It took 32 games to get us to where we're at, and now the ultimate goal is right in front of Nebraska as they face what some people call a monkey, other people call a mountain, in the never-ending quest it's felt like for Nebraska to win their first ever NCAA tournament game. For a lot of programs, Mike, that would seem silly, but to this fan base, nothing would mean more than this team led by coach's son, Sam Hoiberg, long-term team members in Jamarcus Lawrence, Rink Mast, and the supporting cast, Price Sanford, Cale Jacobson, Burke Buchtengel, and everybody else, in securing what this program has so much longed for in, again, their first ever NCAA Tournament win. For myself, Blake, and co-host Mike, go Big Red.
Go Big Red, baby.